The knock on Dr. Eliza Morgan's office door came at exactly 3:15 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday. She looked up from her microscope, brushed a strand of brown hair from her face, and called out, "Come in." 3 people entered, 2 men in dark suits and a woman in military uniform with the rank of general. Eliza stood up, suddenly conscious of her wrinkled lab coat and the coffee stain on her sleeve. "Dr. Morgan?" asked the taller man. "I'm Agent Peter Ward. This is Agent Sam Brooks and General Linda Harris. We need to speak with you about a matter of national security." Eliza gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Her small office at TAOI, the North American Genetic Research Institute, was cluttered with books, papers, and 3-dimensional models of DNA strands. A half-eaten sandwich sat forgotten next to her computer. "National security? What does that have to do with genetic research?" she asked. General Harris spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Dr. Morgan, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. 12 days ago, we made contact with an alien species." Eliza waited for someone to laugh. When no one did, she slumped back in her chair. "You're serious. They call themselves the Voidborn," continued the general. "They've established communication with several world governments simultaneously. They claim to be peaceful explorers from a star system about 40 light-years from Earth." Agent Brooks opened a tablet and showed Eliza an image. The being on the screen looked almost human, but with gray-blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly. Its limbs were too long, its fingers too thin, and its eyes reflected light like mirrors. "They've requested permission to study human DNA," said Agent Ward. "For scientific purposes, they say. In exchange, they've offered to share certain technologies. Nothing weapons-related, but medical advances, energy solutions." Eliza shook her head in disbelief. "And you want my opinion as a geneticist?" "No," said General Harris. "We want you to lead the research team that will work with them." The rain pattered against the window as Eliza tried to process what she was hearing. After 16 years of studying human genetics, after countless breakthroughs in understanding genetic disorders, after 3 prestigious awards, this was not how she expected her career to change. "Why me?" she finally asked. "Your work on genetic adaptation is unparalleled," said Brooks, "and your security clearance is already high due to your previous work with the Department of Defense." Eliza stood up and walked to the window. The research campus below continued its normal afternoon activities, people rushing between buildings with umbrellas, unaware that everything had changed. "When would this start?" she asked. "Immediately," said General Harris. "The Voidborn have already established a temporary research facility in Colorado. They're waiting for our team." 2 days later, Eliza sat in a government car with Dr. Alan Simmons, her colleague and friend for the past decade. The Colorado mountains rose around them as they traveled along a restricted road toward the newly established research facility. "This is crazy," said Alan, his voice low even though they were alone in the back seat. "Working with aliens? Letting them study human DNA? Am I the only one who's seen science fiction movies?" Eliza smiled, despite her own nervousness. Alan was always the cautious one. "The agreement has safeguards. They can only access the samples we provide. They have to share all findings, and 5 nations are monitoring everything." "I still don't like it," Alan muttered. "What do they really want? No species travels across space just for scientific curiosity." The facility appeared around the next bend, a collection of sleek white buildings surrounded by a high fence. Military personnel and security checkpoints guarded the entrance. After passing through 3 layers of security, Eliza and Alan were led to a large laboratory where both human and Voidborn scientists were already at work. The aliens moved with fluid grace, their gray-blue skin changing slightly in tone as they passed through patches of sunlight from the high windows. One of them approached. "Dr. Morgan, I am Nexus, lead researcher for this collaboration. We are honored by your presence." Nexus's voice had an odd quality, as if multiple people were speaking in perfect unison. Up close, Eliza could see that what looked like skin was actually millions of tiny scales that shifted and adjusted continuously. "The honor is mine," she replied, finding her voice. "I have many questions about your interest in human genetics." Nexus's mirror-like eyes seemed to flicker. All species carry the story of their evolution in their genetic code. Humans are particularly interesting because you evolved so rapidly compared to most sentient species. And what exactly will you do with the information you gather? Asked Alan, not bothering to hide his suspicion. We add it to our repository of knowledge, said Nexus. We have studied thousands of species across many star systems. Knowledge is the primary currency of our civilization. Over the next few weeks, Eliza led the human team in a careful exchange of genetic samples and information. The Void-born technology was amazing. They could analyze entire genomes in minutes, create three-dimensional models of DNA that showed interactions invisible to human instruments, and trace evolutionary pathways with incredible precision. But something bothered Eliza. The Void-born seemed particularly interested in human immune responses, regenerative capabilities, and stress adaptations. When she asked about this focus, Nexus always had plausible explanations, but they felt rehearsed. One evening, as Eliza worked late in the lab, she noticed Nexus and another Void-born named Silex engaged in what appeared to be an argument. Their movements were stiff, and though she couldn't understand their language, the tension was clear. When they noticed her watching, they immediately stopped and moved apart. Nexus approached her workstation. "You work very hard, Dr. Morgan," said the alien. "Your dedication honors your species." "Thank you," said Eliza. "I was just finishing up the analysis of immune response variations." Nexus seemed to hesitate. "Your species has many unusual immune adaptations, more than we would expect for your evolutionary timeline." "Earth has always been a competitive place," Eliza replied. "Lots of diseases, lots of parasites. Survival required rapid adaptation." "Indeed," said Nexus. "Competition drives evolution, but sometimes cooperation is necessary for survival." Something in the way Nexus said this made Eliza uneasy. She smiled and nodded, but later that night, in her quarters, at the facility, she couldn't sleep. She pulled out her tablet and began reviewing the data they'd been sharing with the Void-born. What were they really looking for? And why did it feel like they were hiding their true purpose? Eliza didn't know it yet, but she was already caught in a web of deception that stretched across the stars. The Void-born had not come in peace, and what they would find in human DNA would change everything they thought they knew about this small blue planet and its supposedly primitive inhabitants. 6 months passed. The Colorado Research Facility became Eliza's home. She rarely left the compound, driven by a mix of scientific curiosity and growing unease about the Void-born's true intentions. The aliens maintained their polite demeanor, but Eliza noticed patterns in their research that troubled her. They asked for more samples, focusing on subjects who had survived severe diseases or extreme physical trauma. When she questioned this focus, Nexus would offer reasonable but vague explanations. "We seek to understand human resilience," the alien would say. "Your species has unusual recovery capabilities." One evening, Eliza sat with Alan in the facility cafeteria. The room was mostly empty, with just a few security guards at a distant table. Alan pushed his food around on his plate, barely eating. "You've lost weight," Eliza observed. Alan shrugged. "I don't sleep well here. Something feels wrong about all this." "I know," Eliza admitted. "Have you noticed how they keep steering our research towards stress responses and immune function? It's like they're looking for something specific." Alan leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I checked the samples they requested last month. Every single one was from someone who survived sepsis or flesh-eating bacteria. Not a random selection, at all." Eliza thought about this as she finished her coffee. "I'm going to review some data tonight. Want to help?" Alan shook his head. "Can't. I have a video call with my daughter. It's her birthday." Later that night, Eliza worked alone in the lab. The Void-born researchers had retired to their private quarters, an area of the facility off-limits to humans. She accessed the main database, reviewing the test parameters the aliens had established. As she scrolled through files, she accidentally clicked on a secured folder. Surprisingly, it opened without requiring additional authentication. Inside were hundreds of documents with strange symbols, Void-born writing. Most were unreadable, but one file contained a partial translation into English, likely a work in progress. Eliza's heart raced as she read. Human DNA contains unexpected defensive adaptations. Subjects show unusual resistance to genetic manipulation compared to previous species. Recommend careful assessment before proceeding with standard integration. Protocol. Eliza quickly took screenshots, then closed the file and left the lab, trying to appear casual while passing the security cameras. In her quarters, she examined what she'd found, mind racing with implications. Integration protocol. Previous species. The next morning, she sought out Frank Daniels, the head of security. Frank was a former Navy SEAL with a straightforward manner that Eliza trusted. They met in the facility gym during his workout routine. "Need to talk," she said quietly, as she pretended to adjust the treadmill next to his. Frank nodded slightly. Storage closet by the north exit, 10 minutes. The closet was small and smelled of cleaning supplies. Frank closed the door and turned to Eliza. "What's going on, Doc?" She showed him the screenshots on her tablet. "I think the Voidborn are lying about why they're here. They're not just studying us. They're assessing us for something they call integration." Frank studied the images, his expression grim. "Previous species? That suggests they've done this before." "Exactly. And why are they surprised by our defensive adaptations? What were they expecting to find instead?" Frank ran a hand through his short gray hair. "We need more information before we take this higher up." "Can you get into their private database again?" Eliza shook her head. "It was a fluke. I think someone forgot to secure that folder." "Then we need to create another fluke," Frank said. "I have access to the security systems. Maybe we can arrange a small power fluctuation that might reset some permissions temporarily." 2 days later, they got their chance. Frank engineered a 3-second power disruption that affected the southern wing of the facility. As systems rebooted, Eliza was ready. She gained access to several more Voidborn files before security protocols reactivated. What she found confirmed her worst fears. The Voidborn were not peaceful explorers. They were conquerors who used biological warfare against species they encountered. Their method was insidious. They identified genetic weaknesses, then released tailored pathogens that made target species dependent on Voidborn treatments, effectively enslaving entire civilizations. But humans had presented an unexpected challenge. Our DNA contained natural defenses they hadn't encountered before. Eliza took her findings to Frank's office. His room was Spartan, a bed, a desk, and a wall of security monitors. He locked the door behind them. "Look at this," she said, showing him translated documents. Human DNA has what they call viral signatures, genetic code left over from ancient virus infections that our ancestors survived. These act like built-in weapons against the kind of manipulation the Voidborn typically use. Frank studied the documents, so instead of finding flaws they could exploit, they found arms, Eliza finished. Natural defenses built into our DNA from thousands of years of fighting diseases on Earth. That's what's throwing off their plans. "We need allies," Frank said. "People we can trust. This is bigger than just us." They carefully selected 3 others to join their group: Dr. Olivia West, a xenobiologist with military training; Kevin Hayes, a cybersecurity expert assigned as military liaison; and Dr. Richard Bell, a linguist who had been studying Voidborn communication patterns. The 5 of them met in the facility's arboretum, a space designed with plants from both Earth and the Voidborn world. The alien vegetation gave off a faint blue glow, providing cover for their conversation. "The Voidborn are getting impatient," Richard told them. "Their communications have changed in tone over the past week. They're using terms that suggest urgency, possibly even alarm." "They should be alarmed," said Olivia after reviewing Eliza's findings. "Human DNA is remarkably resilient compared to most species. We evolved on a planet with extreme biodiversity and constant pathogenic threats. Our immune systems are battle-hardened in ways they didn't expect." Kevin lowered his voice. "I've detected increased transmissions to their ship in orbit. Much more data than they're officially sharing with us." "What's our next move?" asked Frank. Eliza looked at each of them. We need proof that will convince the government, and we need to understand exactly what the Voidborn plan to do next. As they spoke, across the facility, Nexus was holding a meeting with the other Voidborn researchers. The aliens' skin colors shifted rapidly in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. The humans are more dangerous than we anticipated, Nexus told them. Their genetic structure contains defenses we have never encountered. If they realize their potential, they could threaten everything we have built. Another Voidborn spoke, its voice harsher than the smooth tones they used with humans. Then we must accelerate the timeline. Begin testing the pathogen on isolated subjects. Nexus's skin darkened. Agreed. Select test subjects from the maintenance staff. Their absence will not immediately be noticed. The plan was set. The Voidborn would begin their attack, unaware that Eliza and her small team were already working to expose them. The true nature of human DNA, not flawed and vulnerable, but armed with ancient defenses, was about to change everything. The first sign that something was wrong came when Jerry, a maintenance worker, didn't show up for his morning shift. Then Rosa from cleaning services went missing. By the third day, 7 staff members had disappeared. Frank called an emergency meeting of their small group in the basement server room where they could avoid security cameras. "They're taking people," he said, his face grim. "Always the same pattern. Staff who work alone in isolated areas of the facility." "It's starting," Eliza said. "They're testing something on humans." Richard nodded. "I've been monitoring their communications. They're using terms that translate roughly to test deployment and subject response rate." "We need evidence," Kevin said, typing rapidly on his laptop. "Something concrete we can take to higher authorities." Olivia leaned forward. "I've been analyzing blood samples from the entire staff, part of the routine medical checks. 3 people showed strange cell changes last week before they disappeared. Look at this." She showed them images on her tablet. Normal red blood cells alongside misshapen ones with odd protrusions. "What are we seeing?" asked Frank. "Some kind of pathogen," Olivia explained. "It's attaching to the blood cells and changing them. I've never seen anything like it." Eliza studied the images. "This is how they do it. They release a tailored biological agent that alters the target species, makes them dependent on void-borne treatments." "But why aren't more people sick?" asked Kevin. "Good question," said Olivia. "I think they're starting small, a controlled test on a few subjects. And I noticed something else. All the missing people have something in common in their medical profiles. They all had few childhood illnesses and no major infections in their medical history." Eliza's eyes widened. "They're targeting people with less developed immune responses, people who haven't built up as many natural defenses. We need to find these people," Frank said, "and we need proof the Voidborn are behind this." That night, Kevin used his security clearance to access the lower levels of the facility, areas that were supposedly storage space. Frank went with him, carrying a small camera. What they found shocked them. In a hidden laboratory, the missing staff members lay on medical beds, connected to strange machines. Their skin had a grayish tint, and they seemed only half-conscious. Voidborn researchers moved among them, taking samples and making notes. Kevin quickly photographed everything, then they retreated before being discovered. The next morning, Eliza reviewed their findings with the group. "They're running tests on these people," she said, "seeing how human bodies respond to their pathogen. But why keep this secret? Why not just announce they've found a disease in some staff?" "Because it's not a natural disease," Olivia said. "They created it. Look at the molecular structure in these samples. It's designed to incorporate itself into human DNA, changing how our cells function." Richard had been unusually quiet. Now he spoke, his voice low. "I've decoded more of their communications. They're scared." "Scared? Of us?" Frank asked. "Yes, they've conquered many species across the galaxy, but humans have surprised them. Our DNA contains defenses they've never seen before. The pathogen isn't working as expected." Eliza paced the small room. "So they're accelerating their plans, testing more aggressive approaches." "There's something else," Richard continued. They keep referring to dormant potential in human genetics. They believe if humans realize this potential, we could become a threat to them. What potential? Asked Frank. I don't know exactly, Richard replied. But they seem to think humans have genetic capabilities that we haven't accessed yet, abilities that could make us more powerful than we currently are. That's why they came, Eliza said, the realization hitting her. Not just to conquer another planet, but to eliminate a potential threat before it develops. As they spoke, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in the hallways. What's happening? Olivia asked. Kevin pulled up the security feeds on his laptop. It's the quarantine protocol. The whole facility is being locked down. On the main floor, Nexus stood before a group of government officials who had arrived for a scheduled inspection. The alien's skin had darkened to a deep blue-gray. We have discovered a concerning genetic flaw in your species, Nexus announced, his voice carrying through the facility's speakers. Several of your staff have developed a dangerous condition that requires immediate void-borne intervention. For safety, we must implement quarantine procedures. Eliza and her team watched on Kevin's laptop as soldiers in protective gear entered the building, but they weren't U.S. military. They moved with the same fluid grace as the void-born. Those aren't humans, Frank said. They're void-born in disguise. They're taking control of the facility, Eliza realized. This is the start of their attack. We need to get out, Frank said. Take what we know to the outside world. Not without evidence, Eliza insisted, and not without helping those people they're experimenting on. Olivia had been studying the blood samples closely. I think I found something. Look at this. She showed them 2 samples side by side. This is from Jerry before he disappeared. Normal human blood. This is from another staff member who had severe pneumonia last year. Notice anything? The second sample showed blood cells with slight variations in their surface. The cells in the second sample have protein markers left over from fighting off the pneumonia, Olivia explained. And look what happens when I expose both samples to the void-borne pathogen. In Jerry's sample, the pathogen quickly invaded the cells. In the second sample, the pathogen struggled to attach. Past infections created defenses, Eliza said. The more diseases you've fought off, the more resistant you are to their weapon, Olivia finished. That's the arms they didn't expect to find. Our immune systems keep the memory of every battle they've fought and pass those lessons on to the next generation of cells. Could we use this somehow? Frank asked. Create a defense? Maybe, Olivia said. If we could isolate these protective factors and replicate them. The door to their room suddenly slid open. Nexus stood there, flanked by 2 disguised void-born soldiers. Dr. Morgan, the alien said, your assistance is required for an urgent medical situation. Eliza glanced at her friends, a silent message, passing between them. They needed more time. Of course, she said, stepping forward. I'm happy to help. As she followed Nexus down the corridor, Eliza knew they had entered the most dangerous phase of their struggle. The Voidborn were making their move, but they still didn't understand the full strength of what they had found in human DNA. The coming hours would determine not just their fate, but possibly that of the entire human race. Nexus led Eliza to the main laboratory, where several government officials stood surrounded by Voidborn soldiers. Among them was General Harris, who had first recruited Eliza to the project. Dr. Morgan, the general said, her face tense. Nexus claims there's a genetic emergency affecting facility staff. What do you know about this? Before Eliza could answer, Nexus spoke. We have discovered a dangerous mutation occurring in human subjects. It appears to be triggered by proximity to our species, an unfortunate biological incompatibility. Eliza noticed how the alien carefully avoided mentioning the pathogen they had created. She had to choose her words carefully. Reveal too much and she might endanger her friends. Too little and she would miss this chance to alert the authorities. General, she said, several staff members have indeed fallen ill. Dr. West has been analyzing their blood samples. The condition appears to be a reaction to something in the facility. She emphasized the last words, hoping the general would catch her meaning. The general's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what treatment do you recommend, Dr. Morgan?" "That's why we brought her here," Nexus interjected. "Our medical technology can stabilize the affected humans, but we need Dr. Morgan's expertise on human genetics to properly calibrate the treatment." "May I see the patients first?" Eliza asked. "Of course," said Nexus, leading her and the officials to the hidden laboratory Kevin and Frank had discovered. The missing staff members looked worse than in the photos. Their skin had a grayish-blue tint now, and their breathing was shallow. Strange devices were attached to their arms, pumping a clear fluid into their veins. "What are you giving them?" Eliza asked. "A stabilizing agent," Nexus replied. "Without it, the condition progresses rapidly." Eliza understood the Voidborn strategy. Now, infect humans with their engineered pathogen, then offer a treatment that kept victims alive but dependent on Voidborn medicine. Not dead, but no longer fully human either. Slaves by another name. "I need to consult with Dr. West," Eliza said. "Her immunology background would be valuable here." "Unfortunately, there is no time," said Nexus. "We must begin treatment protocols for the entire facility immediately. The contamination is spreading." One of the government officials, a man Eliza didn't recognize, stepped forward. "If there's a contagious agent, we need to alert the CDC." "That would be unwise," Nexus said smoothly. "Moving infected individuals could spread the condition beyond containment. We must handle this internally." While they argued, Eliza discreetly took out her phone and sent a text to Kevin. "Need distraction. 5 minutes." Back in the server room, Kevin received the message. "Eliza needs help," he told the others. "Time to use your plan, Frank." Frank nodded and pulled out a small device he had assembled from facility equipment. "This will trigger fire, alarms, and emergency protocols in the East Wing. Should create enough confusion for us to move." "And I've got this," said Olivia, holding up a vial of cloudy liquid. "Based on the blood samples, I created a potential treatment. It's crude, but it might help those infected staff members." "What about getting word outside?" Richard asked. Kevin held up a small drive. "I downloaded everything we found. If we can reach the communications room, I can send it to multiple government agencies simultaneously." In the main lab, the argument between Nexus and the officials continued. Suddenly, alarms blared from the East Wing. Red lights flashed, and the automatic doors began closing as fire suppression systems activated. "Security breach," announced the facility's AI system. "East Wing containment protocol initiated." The room erupted into chaos. Nexus barked orders to the Voidborn soldiers, who rushed to respond to the apparent emergency. In the confusion, Eliza slipped away, moving quickly down the corridor toward the server room. She found her friends already in motion. "The Voidborn are making their move," she told them. "They've got the government officials convinced there's a natural outbreak. They're going to put everyone on their treatment to make them dependent." "We need to split up," Frank said. "Kevin and Richard, get to communications and send out what we know. Olivia, you and I will try to help those infected staff. Eliza, you need to get back before they notice you're missing." "No," Eliza said firmly. "I'm going with you. I can help administer Olivia's treatment, and I've seen where they're keeping the infected people." They moved carefully through the facility's corridors, avoiding the Voidborn soldiers who were focused on the fake emergency in the East Wing. When they reached the hidden laboratory, they found only 2 guards, disguised Voidborn, watching over the patients. Frank moved quickly, using his military training to subdue the guards before they could call for help. Olivia immediately went to the patients, examining the strange machines attached to them. "These devices are introducing both the pathogen and the treatment," she said, "keeping them in a dependent state." She carefully removed the device from Jerry, the first maintenance worker who had disappeared. His skin was gray, his breathing shallow. "I'm not sure this will work," Olivia said as she prepared to inject her experimental treatment. "It's based on the protective factors I found in people who had previous infections." "It's his only chance," Eliza said. "Do it." Olivia injected the treatment into Jerry's arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he gasped, his back arching. His eyes flew open and his skin flushed red. "Is he dying?" Frank asked, alarmed. "No," Olivia said, checking his vitals. His body is fighting back. The treatment is working. Meanwhile, Kevin and Richard had reached the communications room. They found it empty. The staff had responded to the fake emergency. "How long do you need?" Richard asked, standing watch at the door. "Just a few minutes," Kevin said, connecting his drive to the system. "I'm sending everything, the Voidborn files, our evidence, the blood analysis, everything, to every agency I can think of. Military, CDC, FBI, even major news outlets. Back, in the treatment room, Jerry's condition had stabilized. His skin was returning to its normal color and his breathing had steadied. "It's working," Olivia said, amazed. "His body is rejecting the Voidborn pathogen." "What exactly did you create?" Eliza asked. "I isolated the protective factors from human immune cells that had previously fought off serious infections," Olivia explained. "It's like a crash course for the immune system, teaching it to recognize and fight the alien pathogen by using the memory of previous battles." Eliza smiled. "The very thing they didn't expect to find in our DNA. The arms are bodies, built through thousands of years of evolutionary warfare." As they began treating the other patients, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. The door burst open and Nexus entered, flanked by Voidborn soldiers. "Step away from the subjects," the alien commanded, his voice no longer smooth but harsh and metallic. "They're not subjects," Eliza said, standing her ground. "They're people, and we know what you're doing. Your plan to enslave humanity is already failing." Nexus's skin darkened to an almost black blue. "You understand nothing. We have conquered 100 worlds this way. Your species will be no different." "You're wrong," Eliza said. "Look at them. They're already recovering." Nexus turned to see Jerry sitting up, his eyes clear, the gray tint gone from his skin. "Impossible," the alien whispered. "Not impossible," Eliza said. "Inevitable. You searched our DNA for flaws, but you found arms instead. Arms that have been fighting invisible wars since before we built our first cities." Behind Nexus, more Voidborn soldiers appeared in the doorway. Eliza and her friends were trapped, but she knew that outside their message was spreading. The truth about the Voidborn was being revealed. The real war was just beginning. Nexus stepped forward, his mirror-like eyes fixed on Eliza. "This changes nothing. Your primitive treatment may help these few, but we have already begun large-scale deployment of the pathogen. Within hours, major population centers will be affected." The Voidborn soldiers raised their weapons, strange devices that hummed with energy. Frank moved protectively in front of Olivia, who was still treating the patients. "You won't win," Eliza said. "Every message Kevin sends decreases your chances. The world will know what you are." A commotion in the hallway drew everyone's attention. General Harris appeared, followed by several armed human soldiers. Her expression was hard as steel. "Stand down, Nexus," she commanded. "We've received some very interesting information about your true intentions." Nexus turned to face her. "General Harris, you do not understand the situation. These humans are interfering with necessary medical treatment." "Save it," the general snapped. "We've seen the evidence. Your transmissions have been decoded. We know about your plans to use biological weapons against Earth." More human soldiers entered, weapons trained on the Voidborn. Nexus's skin rippled with dark patterns, a sign of agitation that Eliza had learned to recognize. "Your species is dangerous," Nexus said, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "We have eliminated threats like you before. Your genetic structure has too much potential." "Potential you tried to suppress," Eliza countered. "But you failed to understand what you were dealing with." Richard entered the room behind the soldiers. "Our communications went through," he told Eliza. "Military bases worldwide are on high alert. The CDC is preparing countermeasures based on Olivia's treatment formula." The standoff was interrupted by a deep rumbling that shook the entire facility. Dust fell from the ceiling as lights flickered. "What was that?" General Harris demanded. A young soldier rushed in. "Ma'am, satellites are tracking multiple launches from the Voidborn ship in orbit. They've deployed something into the atmosphere over major cities." "You're too late," Nexus said. "The cleansing has begun. Soon billions of humans will require our treatment to survive. You will surrender or watch your species die. Olivia looked up from her patient. No, you're the one who's too late. Our message included the treatment formula. Scientists worldwide are already reproducing it. Impossible. Nexus hissed. You cannot mass-produce such a complex treatment in time. We don't need to, Eliza said, understanding suddenly dawning on her. We only need to jumpstart people's existing defenses. Their bodies will do the rest. The facility shook again. This time the lights went out completely before emergency power kicked in. We're under attack, a soldier reported. The Voidborn ship is firing energy weapons at military installations. Full response authorized, General Harris said into her radio. Target the alien vessel. Nexus lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Eliza and pulling her against him. A thin blade appeared in his hand, pressed against her throat. I will leave this facility with Dr. Morgan, he announced. She will help us refine our pathogen to overcome your unexpected resistances. Frank started forward but stopped when the blade pressed deeper against Eliza's skin. Take me instead, Olivia offered. I'm the immunologist. I created the treatment. No, Nexus said. Dr. Morgan understands human genetics at a deeper level. She will serve our purpose. As Nexus backed toward the door, dragging Eliza with him, Jerry, the first patient they had treated, slowly rose from his bed. Unnoticed by Nexus, he grabbed a metal stand and swung it with all his strength. It connected with the back of Nexus's head with a dull thud. The alien stumbled, losing his grip on Eliza. She twisted away as Frank and the soldiers moved in, subduing Nexus and the other Voidborn. Thank you, Eliza said to Jerry, who looked exhausted but determined. No one messes with our DNA, he replied with a weak smile. Outside the facility, the battle continued. The Voidborn ship fired again and again, but Earth's combined military forces responded with everything they had. Missiles streaked toward the alien vessel, which tried to retreat to higher orbit. In the command center, Eliza and her team watched, on monitors as the alien ship erupted in flames. Pieces of it burned through the atmosphere like falling stars. What about their biological attack? General Harris asked. The CDC reports that the pathogen is spreading, but our treatment is working, Kevin reported, reading from his tablet. Hospitals are distributing it as fast as they can produce it. And the good news, Olivia added, is that once treated, people not only recover but develop immunity. Their bodies remember how to fight it off. 3 days later, Eliza stood at the window of her temporary office at the Pentagon. The world had changed forever. Humans now knew they were not alone in the universe and that some alien species were hostile. But they had also discovered something about themselves. The door opened and Alan entered. He looked tired but relieved. The president wants to see us in an hour. The UN Security Council will be joining by video. How are the recovery efforts going? Eliza asked. Better than expected, Alan replied. The Voidborn pathogen affected about 3 million people worldwide before we contained it. Almost all have been treated successfully. Eliza nodded. And Nexus? Still in custody. He's starting to talk, revealing information about other species the Voidborn have encountered, some potential allies for us. They walked together down the corridor toward the briefing room where the others waited. You know what bothers me most? Eliza said. Nexus kept talking about our potential. What did he mean by that? Alan shrugged. From what we've learned, human DNA is unusually adaptable. We carry dormant abilities that other species don't have. Because of our messy evolutionary history, Eliza mused. All those near-extinction events our ancestors survived, all those diseases we fought off. Each battle left weapons in our DNA. They entered the briefing room where Frank, Olivia, Kevin, and Richard sat with General Harris and several government officials. The stars just got a lot more dangerous, Frank said as they joined the table. But also more interesting. The Voidborn won't be the last aliens we meet, Eliza agreed. But thanks to what we've learned about ourselves, we'll be better prepared next time. On a screen at the front of the room, images showed the recovery efforts worldwide. Hospitals distributing the treatment, people helping each other, humanity united by a common threat, and a new understanding of their shared strength. They came looking for our flaws, Olivia said, gazing at the images. But they found our greatest strength instead. Our diversity, Kevin added. Each person, with different immune histories, different natural defenses. Our adaptability, Richard said. The way our bodies remember every fight we've ever won. Eliza looked around at her friends, these people who had helped save humanity from its first extraterrestrial threat. They searched our DNA for flaws, she said, but uncovered arms instead. Arms we never knew we had until we needed them. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Washington, D.C. In research facilities across the world, scientists were studying what they had learned from this encounter, preparing for the next one. In hospitals, people were recovering, their bodies now stronger than before. The Voidborn had failed in their attempt to conquer Earth. In doing so, they had awakened humanity to its own potential. Humans now knew that the same chaotic evolutionary history that gave them disease and suffering had also given them strength and resilience. The very things that seemed like flaws, the messy, complicated nature of human DNA, had turned out to be their greatest weapons. And somewhere in the vastness of space, other species would soon learn that humans were not the easy prey they might have appeared to be. They were fighters, survivors with ancient weapons hidden in their very cells. The war was over. Humanity had won its first battle among the stars, and they were just getting started.